computer.
Hey, I think we're live. I think we're recording.
Hi, Heather.
Hey, Miles. How are you?
Very good. And
Good.
excited to talk to you again. I'm liking our Let's Talk series.
No, me too. Me too. This is great. And we get to talk about something I think that I probably think about. I definitely think about this every single day of my life since having gone, is talking about pilgrimage and what that means and why we do it in the first place instead of going on like a regular vacation. And so
Therein lies the options: a regular vacation or a pilgrimage.
exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because I mean, I think often, I'll get asked this. They're like, "How was your trip?" I'm like, "No, it wasn't a trip.
Yeah, because people want that small little soundbite. They want to know that you were on the beach and that you had a good time and that you ate some nice food and you took some pictures, and it fits really nicely on Facebook.
Yeah. But I think it's kind of, it's like a little bit, it's surprising, I think, to some people to say something like it was really intense or it was really transformative or it was really hard. And then it wasn't all of a sudden, I mean, it's so different. I mean, I think that's the thing that I'm really interested in understanding is what is it that makes it so different? Like, why do people do this? I mean, I know why, I guess I know why I did it, but I mean, what is it that drives people to do this? I mean, you've been doing this since you were very young, right? Like almost like right out of college, right? Or even before then.
It's interesting to hear you say what people's reactions are, because I think they have the same reaction to when you say you came back from a meditation retreat and you're like, it was hard, it was challenging. And they're like, oh, it wasn't so serene and you didn't like get really blissed out? No, it was like really hard.
No.
Yeah. So what is a pilgrimage? I mean, I've just been immersed in pilgrimage recently because I'm simultaneously planning 3 pilgrimages right now. And my start with pilgrimage was like the catalyst for my entire career, because I went to India when I was 20. And don't even ask me how I got there, because I have no idea why I was attracted to go to Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha gained enlightenment when I was 20 years old. What instinct, intuition inside me led there. I'll never forget the fact that at that time there was no Google Maps, and we put a family atlas out on the coffee table and tried to find Bodh Gaya on a map, and it was so small that we couldn't find it. So basically, I was going to the Netherlands, to another world, at 20, and I spent 5.5 months, 5 and 6 months there, living in a Buddhist monastery at the site of the Buddha's awakening. Bodh Gaya is the Mecca of Buddhism, and around the vicinity of that area in the northeast of India is all the various sites associated with the Buddha's life. And so what a pilgrimage is I've been and I've been on 6, 7 of them since that time in the last 20 something years, and I had a lot of time to think about what it actually is. And there are both like a classical description of it, which I think is fascinating, but also something more contemporary, which I'm really getting my head wrapped around, and maybe in this conversation it will help me. But the historical reference of the Buddha goes back to the Buddha himself, and at the time that he was about on the verge of his demise or his passing, his students, obviously you can put yourself in their shoes, they were like worried and concerned that the Buddha was going to leave them, and with them possibly all the inspiration that came from being in his presence. And they were asking him, what should we do? And he said, what you can do is you can go to the various sites associated with the milestones of my life, and there you will find me. And I think that's an incredible way of putting it. And what is it that they will find there is not the actual living Buddha, but the residue or the remnants or the presence, the vital presence of his life markers, his major milestones. So 4 major sites grew out of historical sites grew out of the first kind of recommendations that he gave, to go to the place where he was born, to go to the place where he was gained enlightenment, to go to the place where he gave his first teaching, and to go to the place where he actually died. And there you will find him. And what I think he was meaning was you could commemorate him, because over the years that's where his remains were. This was like memorials of him. like the 9/11 memorial. You can commune with your relatives, and it's like a important feature for people to have a place to go to commemorate. But more than that, I think what he was saying when he said you could find me there is you can find the Buddha within at these places. In other words, these places are charged with incredible power, and what they can activate is your own latent capacities for awakening. So what you find there when he said the Buddha, you can find the Buddha within. I mean, it may be easier to do that at the sacred sites that are imbued with 2,500 years of pilgrimage activity. Perhaps it's easier to do it there than in Times Square. And we could debate that. I mean, from an emptiness point of view, there's no difference, but from a relative point of view, there couldn't be any more difference between Times Square or the World Trade Center or the or Bodh Gaya and the Vajrasana, the diamond throne of where the Buddha sat and woke up. So that's the historical thing. It's pretty cool, isn't it? Like, I mean, it's like a very cool thing to think about that today, an unbroken stream of thousands of years of history where people have made tremendous sacrifice to reach these sacred spaces, to do ritual activities there in order to actualize certain potentials in their mind, to connect them with the Buddha within. So I think just that level alone is amazing. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on it.
When you're saying that, it actually is occurring to me that it feels almost like there's that powerful first event that happened in those places, or the thing that it commemorates or reminds us of. But it sounds like over years and years and years, people are they keep bringing their intentions to this place, and it's almost like it charges it over and over again.
I like that. I like what you're doing there. I can even feel the energy. See, I don't think we believe in that energetic level. I think we're really reductionistic in our thinking and really scientifically technical. And we kind of think that kind of talk is woo-woo. But I think, listen, human beings invest meaning and energy. We ascribe meaning and energy to things. And as you know, when you go to these places, they do have a different vibrational frequency. And that is because thousands of years of people have like invested this charge. And when you go to the site of the Buddha's awakening at Bodh Gaya, all day and all night for thousands of years, it has been invested. I mean, all people do there are their visualizations and their mantras and their purification practice and the recitation of texts and the donation of generous acts of offering. And that is all that's happening there. And if you don't understand energy, you don't understand how energy is created, then it'll be lost on you. But if you're sensitive and you're devout and you have a pure heart and a pure intention and you understand what those places mean, you can really sense it. Something very powerful is happening there.
Yeah, that was like, I remember the first morning that we were at the Bodhnath Stupa in Kathmandu. I remember walking in, and the first thing we did was we circumambulated. It was like we just started walking, and nobody even really had to give us any instruction. It was like you were getting swept into a current.
I love it.
And it was like this unbroken current or circle that felt like it had been going of its own volition, except that it wasn't, but it was just going, and it just held you in its orbit in this way. And I always thought it was so funny when we would walk into that circle and there'd be all those shops and the restaurants, and you couldn't even, there was something you couldn't, like if you walked in and the restaurant was just over there to your right, you couldn't even bring yourself to go right. You had to go all the way around the stupa because there had been so much energy and intention. And I remember feeling that first morning, like there was this real sense of like, it was like a familiarity, or almost like I've been here, or these people understand me, or I understand what they're doing. I mean, and there are these people that are look so different from me, or seem to have all these different experiences. And there are women in front of me just throwing themselves on the ground, and I felt like, oh, I understand that. It was really, I think it was the first time in my life that I felt really deeply understood, or deeply, it was really very powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're kind of exhibiting the kind of connection. You're making connections which in my mind and heart, I have known for a long time are possible, but it's hard to really articulate what's happening, but you've done a beautiful job because you're really talking on a multi-dimensional level that there's something very timeless and ancient inside of you that's connecting to those places. So all of a sudden we start talking about other lives and other possible, other memories, and being connected to a field and being connected to a lineage and being connected to a legacy, but then also like a gravitational pull created by the minds of living beings, and then some sense of transcending your own particular cultural worldview to unite with something very human and very, very at the deepest part of our being. And so that's what I'm hearing when you talk. And it's reaffirming, because some of the thoughts that I've been having as I've developed pilgrimage and have been recently asked to like write some articles about it and do some podcasting around it. So I've had time to think about like, what's it about me inside of me that really makes me want to turn in the direction of really including more pilgrimage activity in my life. And I'm bringing that possibility to other people, because I've kind of pivoted here, like since I did one in 2016, and then we went to Nepal in 2018, and then we'll go to Sri Lanka 2019, and then we'll go to Ladakh 2020, and then I have a really unannounced special pilgrimage in 2020 also. So like what's going on inside of me. And one of the things beyond the historical value, like what the Buddha had suggested, and this sort of this act of commemoration and this act of using pilgrimage as an opportunity to uplift you and to connect with the Buddha within, is also there are two things, and maybe you can help explore them to me. One is the value of what's called a rites of passage, almost from a Joseph Campbell standpoint, like a monomyth, a kind of some form of rites of passage which we do not have any longer in our modern contemporary context. And then the other thing is connected to my thesis in the Gradual Awakening book, which is that we are, as a culture, we have a paradigm sickness. We are basically very sick because we've lost touch with our spiritual legacies and become so reductionistic and so scientific and so materialistic, not in the Madonna sense, but materialistic, that all that we really know is matter. All that we believe in is what we can see, which what you were saying when you felt like you were connected to something more ancient, that's not what you're seeing, but that's something that you're trusting inside of you. And so I think pilgrimage offers this rites of passage, but it may also offer, at least for Westerners from this paradigm, it can be a paradigm remedy, because it is part of pilgrimage really forces you to really evaluate your own cultural assumptions. And when you enter into the stream of pilgrims who, for them, their own cultural values are still tied to a world, a sacred wisdom tradition, it forces you to have a kind of cultural clash. And you see in the Tibetans the ability, you see these wrinkled faces and you see the heart of devotion in them. You see them as people who have endured great hardship and even genocide, and yet they have such a generous spirit. And when you and I were at the nunnery with these beautiful nuns, there wasn't enough that they couldn't give us. They wanted to just give. And you and I know in our own backyard, if someone came knocking on the door, that what we meet with people who ask, strangers who ask for anything, is suspicion. And what we receive when we're in another country, particularly countries that still have this very faint echo of a legacy of spiritual wisdom culture, it is unfathomable, the level of generosity of spirit. And so I think, we can talk about these two dimensions, the mythical one of Joseph Campbell's rites of passage, and this other one, which is almost a paradigm remedy, right. Because there are small vestiges of these sacred wisdom cultures still existing. They are on the verge of extinction, but they're still there. And pilgrimage allows you to connect with them in this very deep, immersive way that I don't think we have access to if we just stay in our own little bubbles.
Right, yeah. I mean, I remember getting on that plane to go, just the first leg of my flight. When you talk about Joseph Campbell and that hero, that sort of rite of passage, I had a panic attack on the plane on the way, I was like, what have I done? What am I doing? I can't believe, I can't believe I'm on a plane for this long, first of all, but second of all, like, where am I going? What am I doing? What have I signed myself up for? And I didn't really even know what I was in for. Like, I knew where Nepal was on a map, and I had read the materials, and I just was like, there was no way to really prepare for that in the way that I usually prepare for everything else in my life. It was like the preparation was like an undoing, I think, more than anything. It really was.
What do you mean by that? That's a beautiful expression.
It was one of the first times in my life that I really truly connected with this idea of like, I just need to let go and just stay open to what's going to happen. Like, I know that we would have these, these calls, our whole group would have a call, like, here's what you should bring, or what you might expect, or here's our itinerary. But it really occurred to me very early on. I just was like, what kind of mindset do I bring to this? And all that I could think of was like, don't bring anything, come naked, like, I mean, I overpacked, but, like physically overpacked, but there was this real sort of nakedness to showing up. And that was scary. That was really scary. I remember when the plane started to take off, being like, oh, somebody let me off this plane. And the nice man next to me, luckily, was like, you don't look so good. And I'm like, I'm not doing well. I'm like, I got to tell you, I am terrified. And it was very kind. He was like a young Indian guy. And he talked to me for like many, many, many hours, just about whatever. Like, we had this very human interaction that I don't think I would have even had with the person sitting next to me on the plane if I was going to Chicago, or Hawaii, or even like Bali or someplace like that. It was a real sort of, I just was like, I'm falling apart here, and I need you to just, keep the human connection going, I guess. I don't know. It was really something.
If I recall correctly, you had an injury. You had just come through a surgery and you needed a crutch. I mean,
yeah. No, I hadn't had the surgery yet. They decided that I wasn't going to be able to recover quickly enough. So I dislocated my knee, I think like 3 or 4 times in that year. The last time being, I think, maybe 3 or 4 weeks before we left.
Yeah. So what a heroic, I mean, this is, I think, okay, so let's go the route of talking about the rites of passage, and then we'll do paradigm therapy. But
sure.
You're setting this up, and what you're talking about is what Joseph Campbell called the call to adventure.
Yeah.
Okay. There's some deep calling, but it is, most of us refuse the call. We're not interested in this, like, we're very comfortable in our lives. We have our routines, we have our job, we have our families, we have our bird path. We go from A to B and B to A, and that's it.
Right.
Why the hell do you want to go to effing Nepal? And why would you want to get on a 30-hour trek to go there? And then when push comes to shove and you have an injury, like, why would you, like, what's calling you, girl? Like, why are you doing this? And Joseph Campbell says it's something deep in human nature that we have a mission in life. We are actually a soul. We're not just this body. And our soul is calling for some illumination, some lesson, some deeper understanding about our condition and our circumstance and our actual nature. And there are these little breadcrumb trails and these little portals and little opportunities, and they're all just the beginning. And most people don't want to hear about it. But the moment you open that door, it is very disruptive. Leaving home, he calls it. You have to leave home. And leaving home means, in your case and in mine, it meant leaving children, it meant leaving the comforts, the things that you're used to, the things that you expect, like all the things that prop your psyche up, you get dismantled. So in a way, it's the beginning of a death.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about in terms of a rites of passage, like the leaving the comforts of home mean you have to venture into the dark forest. And you got on a long plane not knowing but you had the right attitude. You're like, I trust that there's something deep here that's calling me and I have to surrender. So if you just look at that in terms of its relationship to how to face death, for example, you're in good stead. You're in good stead. You have like a warrior's heart. You're like, I'm not going to stay comfortable. I'm going to push the edges. I'm being called and I'm going to listen. I'm going to go through the dark night. I'm going to go through the transitional place. I'm going to go through the vortex that the airplane takes me through. And then I land in this other place. And you get hit with a number of different trials. Like you get bombarded by senses and smells and tastes, and nothing is familiar. And you've got to learn how to pull yourself up again by your bootstraps. And it's basically what a rites of passage does is it forces you to confront a lot of your fears and anxieties, but it's designed to, at the first stage, utterly dismantle you.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, and I could feel like a lot of garbage coming up, throughout the whole time. And I mean, a lot of tears, but also just this real feeling of being somehow very safe, or very much so at home. It's like this comfort with groundlessness in a way, or just coming home to that. I mean, I wasn't sure what I would find. I mean, I wasn't sure. Sometimes we would go to the sites, and I'm like, I wonder. I think I just tried to stay open to all of it. I just was remembering when you were talking about this whole idea of the paradigm sickness, and talking about these other cultures. I remember this experience of being at the stupa one of the first mornings, and I was trying to sort of fumble my way through prostration. And there are all these people who do it all the time that are around, like, I'm not even sure what. And I remember just kind of fumble my way through it with my like yoga kind of, like sun salutations kind of thing. And this man next to me kind of watched me for a while. Like, I think he let me do a whole bunch of them. And then he kind of went, and he like showed me one little thing, like one little small thing that like step back a little further. Like, so then I did that for a while. And then he was like, and he kept giving me little nuggets, but it was like he was waiting to see if I was really sincere or something, or I don't know. And then eventually he ended up giving me his little things for your hands that you slide with. And he kind of watched me do a few. And he was like, okay, yeah, you got it. And then I realized, I was like, I've probably done 100 already. And I haven't even really begun, it was
Incredible.
really, yeah, it was really incredible.
On so many levels, that's so incredible. But he's basically, like taking you under his wing, like, like very kind in a way, because he's inviting you into a very deep ritual process that is familiar to his culture, that is designed for purification and opening your heart and altruism. You're doing these prostrations, you're reducing the negativities in your mind and cultivating the positives, and you're doing that by way of a multi-dimensional body, speech, and mind embodied practice. And he doesn't need to do that. He's doing his practice and he'll be off to work or whatever. But he sees you and he's like, probably something like, you poor thing, you come from a country where you don't have any of this. I'm happy to help you. And that is the paradigm remedy. That's what for as much as our culture has offered science and technology and breakthroughs of this and that kind, and there's no way to disparage that. Those things are incredible. In another way, we're a little lost. We're like children, and we don't have guidance, and we don't even have we're so far removed that we don't even know we've lost it. So we're living with amnesia. And not only we orphaned because we've lost connection with the mother of spirit, but we're also amnesiatic, and we don't even know that we're orphaned, but we are plagued by symptoms. And then the medical doctors will tell them, you tell us that, this chronic fatigue and this depression, this anxiety, here is a surgery, here's a pill.
Right.
But nothing is far reaching enough to that moment where this guy turns to you and goes, no, this is how you do this practice to connect with this deeper thing that you cannot see, that is inside all of us.
Yeah.
Is the Buddha nature, or the possibility of enlightenment, or the development of compassion, or the development of generosity, which makes you human and makes you and brings buoyancy in your life. I mean, there's a lot going on here. But it's very revelatory that simple things like this, karmic acts of generosity, purifications at a sacred space, there's a whole world that's happening there, and this guy's leading you in it because he sees that you're probably stuck.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because I feel like so often we're so interested in like, just tell me how to do it right. I want to do it correctly right away. What's the quickest way that I can get this done right? And what a beautiful example of someone just very quietly teaching you by being like, you need to hit your head on that board at least 100 times before you actually even understand what the sincerity of what you're doing is. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was really very, it was like, this is about surrender. And so you got to get exhaust. You have to exhaust. It's like I had to exhaust that was another thing in the pilgrimage. It's like you have to exhaust almost that part of yourself that is so addicted to that paradigm that, what I mean? It's addicted to the sickness, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, it really.
God, you're using great words, Heather. Like the word exhaust is really hitting me, because I think, yes, that's part of the first phase, like of getting rid of or letting go of or surrender or leaving home or getting out of the familiar, getting out of the cocoon, like that, that's what part of the purification is, the letting go of something that hasn't served in order to open you up for other things. So maybe we can cross the threshold and go into the dark night and the next few phases of the Campbellian monomyth. And what happens in what is enacted in a pilgrimage is then you find the source, then you connect with the source. And of course, if I say source, you're going to remember that it was not only those places, but the people, I'm thinking, first and foremost, of course, of Geshe Tenzin Zopa and the powerful blessings and teachings that he gave us. But I'm also recalling the Golden Temple moment.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you want to share what your experience was like during the Golden Temple and just like what it was like to enter into that threshold into another time. I mean, that was a portal. That was undoubtedly a portal. And what happened there let's see how articulate you are, if you're capable of conveying just the magic that happened there.
It was almost like, it felt a little bit to me like, we could have never planned what happened there. Like, if we had called in advance and been like, hey, do you think like the abbot could come and like do a little ceremony for us and make it really nice? It was like we go to this place and we're kind of walking around like the rest of the tourists, taking the pictures, and they're like, here, come into this shrine room, and and all of a sudden we're in the middle of this whole ritual, and they're giving us, and maybe they have the kathas and the whole, it was just, again, it was like we all went we went in with our hearts, and then something just appeared. You know what I mean? But again, I don't think Stefan called that guy and was like, we're coming at 10 a.m. and can you do this, and I'll slip you some money. Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. It was really, it was very emotional in this way that I think kind of blindsided us a little bit. I think that was like really the kind of the beginning of that. It was like a turning point, it felt like to me. And that, I don't know, yeah.
It's what you're describing is magic. You're talking about something appearing that you could have never, it just blows you away. It's a miracle. It's like, these are modern miracles. So the group gathers to go to this famous temple that has been there for a long time, the Golden Temple in Patan, and it's beautiful. And you have to cross a threshold of beautiful architecture. And once you get into the inner sanctum or the courtyard, you get a blessing, and that blessing is a ritual initiation and that activates your third eye. And what is a third eye? But it helps you see dimensions at the physical level you cannot behold. And then we were going to just do a prayer there and make some offerings, which is standard fodder for a pilgrimage. But then something magical happens. The abbot shows up and he invites us into his private shrine room where there is the deity. And I think it was Chenrezig, or the Buddha of compassion, right? Yeah. And the abbot, we come to find that the abbot himself has a long pedigree. He is in the line of the Sakya clan, which is the clan associated with the Buddha. So he's blood of the Buddha. Yeah. And his predecessors have all been in charge of this ancient monastery where they are the keepers of the spirit. Yeah. That goes right back to the Buddha. So guess what the Buddha said? Go to these places and there you will find me. And there he is. And we sit down, and though we cannot communicate so well in our normal language,
Right.
we did enough preparation as a group to go through the traditional Tibetan prayers.
Right.
And then what does he give us? He gives us the transmission of what is called the King of Prayers. A beautiful, anyone can Google it. It is a beautiful, very lengthy ritual prayer. And he offers the transmission of this to all of us, like the greatest gift you could ever imagine. And at the conclusion of that, because it was part of the Gradual Awakening book tour, I asked him to bless the Gradual Awakening book, and he blessed the books, which is basically my life's work. So we had this unbelievable convergence of what you say, like the heart of devotion, like these young, we're like children. That's how I see myself. We're like these young hopefuls with wide-eyed, following our intuitions into these portals, and then the magic Buddha shows up and then bestows us on a sacred lineage that ties us back into history to this thing that we have lost, and we're just like sucking at the teat with these like hunger, yearning, desperation. We want to reconnect with spirit, and then he blesses us for our ongoing contemplation. And what have we ventured into now? We've ventured into the contemplative studies program, all based on Gradual Awakening, which has been blessed by all of these wisdom keepers. And so we're just living the blessing, right? We are together pursuing this study that has been anointed, if you will, by these sacred keepers of the spirit. This is the mythological level. People listening right now may feel like I'm being overly dramatic, but we have lost this level of dimensionality, this kind of story, this myth, this lore, this legend, this magic, this ineffable quality of this dimension of life, this vitalizing force. And I think everybody, you're right, Heather. I think that was early on in the pilgrimage, and I think it just was a total like, whoa. I think at that point, then we were in it.
Oh yeah. And it's funny because I'm realizing when I came back, I had a very I think I had a very difficult time articulating for a long time what my experience was, because it was so deeply felt. And I went to get some body work done with my body worker, who's a very also spiritually in tune kind of a guy. And he said, you are almost completely in your right brain right now. He's like, I can understand why you can't put language to this right now. It's all just, and when he was working on me, I could hear the sound of the monks, chanting from the Kopan monastery. Like that vibration just came up through my body. I could smell all the smells. It was like being transported right back to that place. And it's this part of our minds that we don't, some of us live in it more than others, but so, to really awaken that part of ourselves was really profound, I think, because I think that's what those places speak to in a lot of ways, it's hard. It's really hard to find language. It's beautiful. I'm kind of wondering why, like when we had an experience, like when we went to like, I think it was what was it, Pashupati, where they were burning the bodies.
Pashupatinath.
Pashupatinath. When we had the kirtan, and while we were watching the bodies burn, and I just remember a few of us like really just like crying in this way, that like we were almost crying for our own deaths. And you could see that that moment when the body burned, and then all of a sudden there was like a lightness and a joy that came out of the release. And I remember I was kind of joking with another pilgrim recently, like, oh yeah, and then that was the night after we went to like basically the charnel grounds, that we went out and we're just like celebrating all night. Like there was this incredible joy.
Yeah, remember after there was that big dance party basically in the street, where we got roped into this big dance party after our cremation ceremony.
The Hindi celebration, right?
And I think people are crying, Heather, throughout the pilgrimage for various reasons.
Right.
But I do think it's the tears of coming home.
Yeah, for sure.
Because our culture For example, this is a good example. Like death is so sanitized in our culture. We don't know how to die. We don't know how to commemorate. We don't know how to go through a grieving process. We're children again. We're amnesiac. We have no, it's like, death is like a very, it's so superficially understood and so charged with terror and fear, and we don't know how to deal with it, and we don't want to look at it, and then it comes upon us and we're not ready, and then we don't know how to process it. It's like we're just juvenile and delinquent about it. And then we go to these other cultures where death is a central part of life, and it's ritualized, and there are really appropriate ways of dealing with things. And if you look closely at the current science that we're doing in the Trauma Informed Dharma lecture series, you're going to see that the ritual, the group bonding, the singing, the chanting, the movement, the shaking,
Yeah.
these are all they're now we know that these all make more robust the vagal nerve, and they keep us bonded, and they keep us active, and they keep us from falling into the depths of trauma and falling into fight, flight, and even further into paralysis. And so there is a natural way people have understood how to deal with life that we have forgotten, because we think we own life. We think we have dominion over life. We don't see ourselves as part of life. We have forgotten some very basic rudimentary things, and we've forgotten our rituals and our customs and our practices and our spiritual worldviews. And then when the inevitable hits us, we don't know how to deal with it. We're like blindsided. And so when we were at Pashupatinath, I mean, remember Tiffany and Conchi's beautiful chanting, and then the bells, and like the resonance of harmonics, and then the smoke from the pyre and the sacred river.
Yeah.
And like there was like an energetic release in all that, an appropriate release. And it wasn't even our loved ones on the pyre, right? But we were still feeling part of something bigger
I felt
than
like I was on
ourselves.
the fire. I was like, Judy and I were standing there like, that's me, right? Like it was really intense.
Really strong. And then right after, there was like this party. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, and shaking, and like the image of the deity, and loud noises, and like the body is moving, and the energy is releasing, and it's like something mysterious and magical is also happening there.
Yeah.
And every day on pilgrimage was like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it culminated, if we just continue a few steps forward into the monomyth, like you have this, you make your sacrifice and you kill your demon. And what's your demon is all your false ascriptions and your false assumptions, and all your security blanket that you've been holding on to, that's keeping you basically anesthetized. You are fully open after a week of and a half of pilgrimage, and then enters in the Bodhisattva vow by Geshe Tenzin Zopa at the stupa. And what was that like for you, if you could describe it?
Oh, I can't even begin to I don't even know if there are words to describe that. I mean, it was really, I had taken the Bodhisattva vow previously, from like a Western preceptor, at like a center or whatever, and it was really, I remember when he said like, now your life has been given meaning, or now your life is meaningful. And it was like, yes, that was it. That was exactly it. I just, yeah, I think at that point I had become so surrendered that I really just felt like there is no way, even if I have doubts about how I'm going to, do this work, or, the Bodhisattva vows about, trying to awaken yourself so you can help other beings. I'm like, this is not a choice. This is choiceless. And it is so, yeah, it was so clear in a way that was different than when I had taken it before, where before I just was like, okay, yeah, well, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to really try. Like I really felt that I was set upon a path, and that this was it. I felt so completely connected to those people that I took the vow with as well. I care so deeply about all of those people, and it was like my eyes could see so much more. Like it was like they were widened in some ways to everyone that was around me in a way that didn't feel overwhelming, because that's a really crowded place. And I remember, I think the most powerful thing for me was at the end, then he had us walk around and look into the eyes of the stupa from all of the directions. and speak from our hearts, what our aspirations were. And he was really like, you really be sure what you want to say, because this is like, this is what you're offering, or this is going to come true, or this, and I think about those aspirations every day, I mean, that, and I see them coming to bear fruit in my life in ways that I wouldn't have otherwise been like, oh, and this is how I'm going to get there. I'm going to do it this way. That's what that's going to look like. Like, it's almost like something will happen and I'll say, oh yeah, that's the beginning of that first aspiration, or oh yeah, that's that third one. Oh yeah. I think I told you, I said to Catherine, a friend of ours from pilgrimage, she's like, so what are you doing? I'm like, I'm keeping my promises that I made to the stupa with Geshe Tenzin Zopa. And she's like, oh, that sounds wonderful and terrifying. And yeah. I mean, I think we don't have those kinds of rituals in our lives at all, and I think I've always craved those, and I've needed them so much, for someone to say, here we are in this place and we're going to make this promise, and to feel like I wasn't brought there by like my parents who said like, and now you're going to take your communion, or you're going to take your whatever. It was, I would, something inside of me led me there. And that was that place that I didn't know where I was going until I ended up there.
I'm tearing up thinking about it, because I thought it was so profound, profound. All of us together, Geshe Tenzin Zopa. So we had all the elements, talk about mythology. We had the embodied master, the awakened living Buddha. Yeah. We had the space. I mean, it would take a whole next episode to go through the Bodhnath stupa and its significance, but it's iconic stupa with the eyes gazing in all directions out of compassion for the suffering beings of the world. It is the manifestation of the Buddha, and they call it a wish-fulfilling gem. They call it the aspirations made at the stupa will come true for sure. And it has been there for thousands of years, and it has been an epicenter, ground zero for the pilgrimage activity. And so it's just infused with all this energy, as we said at the top. But then, so you have the master and you have the setting, and you have the mindset. And so what we're doing, if we start to take a big step back, we're not just Heather and Miles and 30 other people. We are souls, and we have finally come home and recognized what this trip is all about. And we are tired of floating on the currents of evolution, being pulled here and there by our impulses. We want to take the reins of evolution. And the Grand Master is there to anoint us to initiate us into the commitment, the resolve to awaken for the benefit of others. Right. And I remember everybody was dressed in white, people's eyes were closed, their hands in prayer position. Geshe Tenzin Zopa was going through the liturgy, and then he, once we had taken the commitment, I vow for all my lives, countless lives, to be motivated out of compassion to serve others. I will awaken for their benefit. The orientation of my entire life. And this is again this is both the monomyth and the rites of passage, but it's also the heart of the paradigm therapy. Because if you look at why we're sick, our orientation to life is really just hedonic. We're just here for one life. We're just here to consume and produce. We are here to follow our instincts for pleasure and to avoid pain, and nothing else. And then we die. And that's it. That's basically all there is to our culture. And yet so many of us know and are remembering and are trusting our intuition that we are more than this. And then we get to that epicenter in that place with those people, with that master in this ritual. And it is the moment where you finally take responsibility for your soul's evolution and directing it towards awakening. I am here to awaken for the benefit of others. And then his famous refrain that you acknowledge that is echoing in my head right now is, said it over and over again. Now your life is meaningful. Now your life is made meaningful. Now your life is made meaningful. And everybody's in tears. You see, everybody's in tears because it's like what they have been searching for, they have finally found. Now, does that mean we're all enlightened? No, because you and I are just as crazy as anybody else. But we're not lost anymore, and we're not confused anymore.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, that is very powerful medicine when most of our culture is lost and confused, is orphaned and amnesiatic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a confidence that comes through then, it's like an ability to be with. I feel like my capacity to be with other beings has expanded so much from that experience and from that vow. It's so funny though, because in my interactions with Geshe Tenzin Zopa, he was not going to allow us to then sort of put him up on a pedestal and be like, well, just whatever the teacher says, we're just going to do, and he's going to be there. He kept just being like, yep, no, I'm not your guru. I'm not your guru. Sorry, whatever. And it's funny, he gave us these little blessing cords right after the ceremony, and this little blessing cord falls off every other day. Like it slips off. I don't know. I could put like 1,000 knots in it, and every few days it's gonna slip off, and I have to tie it back on. And I always think about him, like pointing back to me and being like, I've said this before, but when he just was like, I'm not your guru. Shakyamuni Buddha is your guru, which is basically like this is you. It's up to you. And it's like you have this little reminder, and then every once in a while it slips off, and you're like, oh, I gotta put this thing back on, Like before I had a surgery, they tried to cut it off, I remember, and I just was like, oh no, my teacher gave me this. You can't cut this off, no. And some like nurse wandered into the room, and he said, oh, I know what those are. He goes, I'm gonna untie all the knots for you, and I'm gonna put it in a little thing, and I'm gonna hold on to it, and it's gonna be here, and we'll put it back on later. Like it's such a beautiful.
It is a beautiful story.
Little thing. Yeah, it's such a it's just so there he is, but not, but also like like it's really that's what it feels like in a lot of ways. That's what a lot of it feels like.
One of the things that I saw was how deeply impactful that moment was, how deeply necessary it was for them as individuals, but also how deeply necessary it was for us as a culture.
Yes.
And one of the commitments I made when we were going to all four corners of the stupa was, may I be a facilitator to help people remember. And I made commitment, like if it were possible for me once a year of my life to ferry boat people,
yes, to
these shores, through these portals, to the sacred masters, and to the sacred wisdom teachings that they possess, so that we can remember who we are and why we're here. To me, that would be life well spent. And so I made a vow there. Please let me be of service in this particular way. I mean, I have been in service as a therapist for many years. I've had 6 pilgrimages in my life, and I intend to now take a pilgrimage every year, if possible.
Yeah.
Because I think at a cultural level, those immersive, deep experiences and helping people connect and live life, at least for 2 or 3 weeks, so deep into it that this arc of this hero's journey can be fully actualized, from the letting go to the opening, to the receiving of the blessing, to the final return home, then that would be, for me, so meaningful, something that I aspire to do. And so as soon as we get home, what do we do as a group? We put together the Contemplative Studies program. And as we put together the Contemplative Studies program, I said, I'm going to run, at least for the next 2 years, a pilgrimage every year.
Yeah, yeah.
And right then and there, I started working on Sri Lanka, which is happening in December.
Right.
And then we get to go back to Ladakh with Geshe Tenzin Zopa in 2020, so that those of us that didn't get the vow and those of us that did, we can all share together that powerful experience of reaffirming our commitment in this way. And all the naysayers that say, well, you don't have to go away and you can do it here. Yes, of course you can do it anywhere, but don't deny the fact that if it is possible, if you have the predilection and you have the resources, It is possible to go to sites like this. They are special and magical. And there's an additional charge there that can really make a significant impact or imprint on your mind. And the other day I was talking to someone who was one of these naysayers that was saying, well, these things are quite expensive, and a lot of people don't have the finances for it. And I said, yes, that's true on one hand. But on another, if you look at other cultures where pilgrimage is still very vital, like for the Muslim, not every Muslim is a wealthy person, but every Muslim makes an effort to scrape together enough funds to go to Mecca because it's central to their faith. And that can mean saving for 10 or 15 years in the way that some of us go to save for college or save for healthcare or save for retirement or spend money on entertainment. It's just a different reframe for priority. But when it comes to pilgrimage, if you save for 3, 4, 5 years, you can definitely go. If you understood what your soul was calling for and what your soul could have. And then other people like blame me for cultural appropriation. They say, well, this is Indian culture. You're stealing from Indian culture. And you know what I say to them, Heather? I say, if that were true, then what are you going to say the Dalai Lama is? The Dalai Lama cultural appropriating? Because he's a Tibetan.
Yeah.
And if Buddhism came from India, then anybody outside of India, like Thich Nhat Hanh's a cultural appropriator. Buddhism doesn't belong to anyone. Buddhism is reality.
Yeah.
What we are discovering doesn't belong to even a religion. It's not even about Buddhism. When you're in that moment and you're reclaiming your soul's purpose, it transcends all religion. It transcends all culture. It transcends male and female. It transcends rich or poor. It transcends everything. So anybody who's going on about nonsense in that way hasn't really tasted a transcendent moment where there is no more identity politics or anything else like that.
Yeah. I mean, I know now that there are, it's funny when you're talking about cultural appropriation, because there is a family here of a Nepalese family that I actually brought money to their family in Nepal when I went on pilgrimage. And just the amount of sharing that then I went through with this family and with this end of the family here in Portland and the end of the family in Kathmandu. I was like a bridge for this family that hadn't connected with one another physically in maybe like 15, almost 20 years. And it was, and it really was a lesson for me in this idea of, when we talk about interconnection or interdependence that comes just through being a human being and being willing to be open to, they're like, you're going to Kathmandu, what are you doing there? That's what you're doing. That's what my family does, and it wasn't a cultural appropriation. It was very much so this like, here, we can have this connection on this level, where I was clearly once again fumbling through what I was doing with real sincerity, and then all of a sudden we have this connection that wasn't there before, and me turning to these people being like, what else can you tell me about this? Please, I want to understand. I know what, and I know that there's this understanding now between both sides of that family and myself of just that felt sense. They can't be worn in a mala. Do you know what I mean? Or just like, I can put on these beads and be like, these are my beads that were blessed at the blah, 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 but I feel like we all know that we know, and there is an unspoken knowing that lets me, that helps me to understand. I think just interconnectedness. It's really great.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is, is you closing the circle of what it's like to come back from a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
With new understandings and new motivations and the desire to connect and the desire to integrate it, because we all have to come home. We can't stay with Geshe Tenzin Zopa under the shade of the stupa in that magic. We have to come home, but then a new life starts. And has it been easy, Heather?
No.
None of us, right down the line, all 32 of us that came home, I don't think there's a single one of us, with the exception of Stu, because he's like already, achieved some great fancy, amazing breakthrough in his life. But none of us really came home to an easy ride. Okay. And so then it's like, oh, what's that about? And I think what that's about is like, most of us are coming back to the disassembling of our former life that we now have to rebuild with what we have learned.
Yeah.
So people are getting, separations. People are getting new jobs. People are leaving one relationship for another. People are finding new ways of work, making career transitions. People are getting over illnesses. There is like the rebirth process and the re-entry and the reintegration process has begun for some of us. So it doesn't get tied up like we're going to tie up here in the next minute here, a nice little bow. The pilgrimage in a way never ends, because it just now the hard work of integrating everything that happened to us in those 2 or 3 weeks is now our burden and our opportunity. So I think that happens in many different ways, but it is also like very profound to now come home, each of us inspired and uplifted, but each of us having to resurrect a new life for ourselves that includes service, that includes contemplation, that includes like the laundry and the dishes and all of it, and making choices, making sometimes very painful choices, but really all in the service of fulfilling the wish and the aspirations that we made in that holy site. And so there's like this magnitude, it's like the stupa is sending us home in a wave after we made that commitment. And those waves, they like crash on the shore. Some of us crashed when we came home. A few of us really crashed, but then it's like rebuild. Now you have to use what you've discovered. It's like what Campbell called at the end of the hero's journey is bringing home the elixir, and sometimes you hobble home with the elixir.
But I mean, I can't unsee. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's the thing, is once you cross that threshold, you can't unsee. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if I know what to do with the elixir. I know that yeah, but I really trust so much more now. I tried. There's just so much more trust in all of it. In a way that I think, when you just circle back all the way to the beginning again of our conversation, when you go on a vacation, pretty soon you're back to your life and you're just like, oh, when's my next vacation? Or, oh, that was so fast, or, whatever. That this pilgrimage, it just keeps revealing itself. It keeps unspooling itself in my life. And I think will continue to do so for such a long time.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. They're once in a life experiences, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Heather. It really reaffirms some of the thinking that I've been doing, and it adds such a personal level. And it's so nice to rekindle this together, because we shared that, and every time we talk about it, now it's a positive association. We can bring that spirit right back. And so I always love talking about it, but we don't want to talk people to death about it. This was the longest Let's Talk episode that we've ever done.
I could go on for another hour, but we're not.
I could too, and I was thinking, well, what's that about? And so that's the power of pilgrimage. We were so moved by it that I think, like, out of everything that you and I have talked about, karma and trauma and this and that, like, pilgrimage is the one that just, like, we could go and go and go and go. So that says something. So anybody's interested in pilgrimage, you can visit milesneale.com/pilgrimage. And there you'll find all the opportunities that await us in the next year or two. And I feel so blessed and fortunate to share all of that with you, Heather, and all the other pilgrims, and in the future, anybody else who feels ready to answer the call to adventure. So thank you so much, Heather. Take good care.